They told me I was a fool. They told me no man in his right mind would ever let her go. She was a heroine of our story. At least, that's what the world believed. In the south, Mr. Highlands of Scotland, where rolling hills cradle deep, quiet lochs, Goliath a story wished from one generation of another, a story that has drifted gently across centuries, much like the ripples that touch the edges of Loch Ness itself. Tonight, as you rest, allow yourself to sink into this timeless tale, a mixture of myth, history, and gentle imagination, a story meant not to startle or thrill, but to soothe and ease your busy mind into calmness. The tale begins long ago, in a land where still waters stretched for miles, reflecting moonlit and clouds, a place where silence was broken only by a soft call of birds and a faint rustle of wind through the hagar. It was here, in this peaceful setting, that whispers of something unusual began to emerge, of the creature that dwelled beneath the dark, glory arches, surfacing only when the world was stillest, glimpsed by travelers and villagers who could never quite agree on what they had seen. The night I made my decision, the house was quiet, as it always was. She sat across from me, her delicate hands holding a glass of wine, her gaze fixed somewhere far beyond my reach. I asked her a question, a simple one that any wife could answer without thought. Are you happy with me? The silence that followed was heavier than any words could have been. Her lips parted as if to form an answer, but she closed them again, choosing instead to sip her wine. That silence told me everything. It was then I realized that I had been clinging to the ashes of a fire that had never truly burned. When I finally told her I wanted a divorce, she looked at me with shock, almost disbelief. Not because she loved me, but because she had never expected me, the man who quietly endured everything, to be the one to end it. Perhaps in her mind, I was meant to remain forever at her side, a shadow that worshipped her light. But I was tired of being invisible. I was tired of being a ghost in my own marriage. The pen felt heavy in my hand as I signed the papers. Yet there was a strange freedom in that weight. For the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe. They all said I would regret it. They said walking away from her was the same as walking away from happiness itself. But what none of them understood was that happiness had never lived in our home. Only appearances had, only masks, and I was done living behind them. Our marriage had always been a stage, a performance carefully crafted for the eyes of others. From the very beginning, the world applauded us as the perfect couple. She was radiant, charming in public, soft-spoken when needed, bold when she chose to be. I, on the other hand, was a quiet man at her side, the one people called mysterious or cold, though they never truly cared to understand me. At gatherings, she would shine under the admiration of countless eyes, while I stood in the background, content to let her glow. People thought I was reserved by choice, but the truth was simpler. I was invisible in her world. She never once reached my hand when the lights dimmed, never once sought comfort in my presence when the noise of the world became too much. To her, I was a stranger she was bound to buy a paper ring. Nay, imagine yourself as one of those early villagers, standing on the bank of the river as Miss curls chocolate around your feet. The water is dark, as deep as ink, and it flows slowly under the pale light of the moon. A scent carries across the surface, perhaps the splash of the fish, or perhaps something more, and you pull your cloak a little tighter, not in fear, but in awe of the unknown. The monks and recorded in Columba's story may have written it with purpose, perhaps to show the saint's strength, or perhaps to remind people of faith and protection. Yet the tale itself became part of the sleeve folklore that Scotland wrapped around its locks. The people, sitting in the cottages, would speak softly of the beast, not as a terror to keep children awake, but as a reminder that shepherds tending flocks, fishermen casting nets, and wanderers pausing at the water's edge all carried the story in the huts. It was never a story told with urgency, never something that shattered the peace of the land. Instead, it moved like the water itself, slow, deep, and unhurried, becoming less of a warning and more of a lullaby for curious minds. Even now, as you rest, you can almost hear the gentle echo of the waters, telling of the creature who slipped through shadows, unseen but always imagined, keeping the lock company through centuries of still nights. The cruelest part was how convincing we appeared to the world. At family dinners, she played the role of the dutiful wife, smiling beside me, pouring tea for my parents. To outsiders, we were harmony itself. Only I knew the truth, that every smile was an act, every gesture rehearsed. Sometimes I would catch her looking at me across the table, her eyes hollow, as though she were trapped. Perhaps she hated me for binding her to a life she did not choose. Perhaps she pitied me for loving her too much. Either way, her silence was louder than any accusation. Looking back, I realized the signs had been there from the very beginning. On our wedding day, while others celebrated, her smile never quite reached her eyes. I was too blinded by love to see it then, but now the memory is sharp as glass. That day was not the beginning of a love story. It was the opening act of a tragedy, and I, in my blindness, walked willingly into it hard. It is strange how the heart can break in silence, without the sound of shattering glass, without the violence of an open wound. Mine broke slowly, piece by piece, in the quiet moments no one else noticed. At night, I would lie beside her, the space between us wider than oceans. She would turn her back to me, her breathing steady, her mind far away. Sometimes in the darkness, I would hear her whisper another name. Not mine, never mine. It was always his. The syllables slid from her lips like a secret prayer, soft and tender in a way she never spoke to me. And each time, I felt something inside me wither. To know your wife's dreams belong to another man is a cruelty beyond words. The legend of the Loch Ness Monster might have stayed a quiet local tale, passed gently from villager to villager, if not for the changes brought by the 20th century. With its bread and newsevers, photography, and curious travelers, the world beyond the Highlands began to hear whispers of the loch and its mysterious resident. In 1933, a new road was built along the shore of Loch Ness, giving people a first clue view of the waters as they drove out. It was a peaceful road, winding gently with the shape of the land, and it opened the loch to more eye than it had before. That same year, reports began to appear in newspapers of a strange creature spotted in the loch, something large and moving, unlike the fish or boats that usually disturbed the water. The world was already hungry for wonder, for stories that stirred the imagination, and the tale of Loch Ness arrived like a gentle dream. Soon, photographs began to circulate. One evening, I returned home earlier than usual. She was in the study, her phone pressed to her ear, her voice hushed, trembling with a softness I had never heard directed at me. She said words I had longed for, "I miss you," but they were not for me. She froze when she noticed me standing at the door. For a moment, guilt flickered in her eyes, but just as quickly it vanished. She met my gaze with defiance that spoke louder than any denial. She did not explain. She did not apologize. And I did not demand either. I turned and walked away, each step heavier than the last. That night, I understood something I had been running from. I was not her hero. I was not even her choice. I was a placeholder, a mistake written into her story, while her heart belonged elsewhere. The realization was both devastating and liberating. Devastating, because I knew I could never be enough for her. Liberating, because I finally understood that holding on was only prolonging my own suffering. Yet, even with that clarity, I hesitated. I still loved her, despite everything. Love makes fools of us all. It clings where it should release. It hopes where it should let go. I told myself I could endure, that perhaps with time, her feelings would change. But deep inside, I knew the truth. A woman who whispers another man's name in her sleep will never truly belong to you. And the more I tried to ignore it, the more unbearable the silence between us became. Imagine being one of Gold's edges, bundled in a warm coat, seated quietly on the hill as a night turns cool. The loch stretches endlessly before you, a dark mirror reflecting the faint glow of stars. Your equipment hums softly, steady and calm, as your eyes scan the horizon. Suddenly, a ripple appears where none should be. The circus trembles for a moment, 'gin swoods again. Or is it a wind? A fit? Or something loaded moving silently in the depths? The question lingers, not urgent, not alarming, but like a gentle thought floating on the breeze. For many who stood at the lock, the greatest reward was not a root but a piece of being. Get chance as it betrayed one of the world's quietest places. And by the time the late 20th century arrived, the Loch Ness Monster had become more than a local legend. It was a symbol, a story woven in a fabric of Scotland's identity, and a gentle mystery that the world embraced. Terrorists flattled from distant lands to stand by the loch, but footsteps soft on the gilded backs, but eyes weighed with expectation as they gazed across the still waters. Families arrived with children, who clutched the iron's hands and whispered questions in hot voices, wondering if it might be the lucky ones to catch a glimpse of Nay, as the creature had affectionately come to be known. Shops in nearby villages offered small figurines, postcards, and warm muds painted with a monster's long neck, not as something terrifying, but as something friendly, an image of wonder. And still, the loch remains the same, calm, deep, and mysterious, holding its secrets beneath waters that glimmer under sun and moon alike. Nettie, whether real or imagined, has become more than a creature. She has become a companion to those. The news of our divorce spread faster than I imagined. Whispers traveled through family gatherings, business meetings, even the quiet circles of friends who pretended not to care yet feasted on gossip like starving wolves. And everywhere I turned, the same words echoed back to me. You'll regret it. It was spoken in tones of disbelief, of pity, of scorn. They looked at me as though I were insane, as though I had just thrown away the rarest jewel in the world. She was the perfect wife, some said. Every man envied you. How could you let her go? Others shook their heads, murmuring about how I had been too cold, too blind to appreciate her. To them, she was a heroine in a romance, a woman whose beauty and charm should have been enough to keep me bound forever. No one asked what lay behind that perfect image. No one asked what it was like to come home to silence, to watch the person you love smile for everyone else but never for you. They saw the surface, and perhaps that was enough for them. But I had lived in the depths, and I knew the truth. Even my own family did not understand. My mother, gentle and proud, pulled me aside one evening. Her voice trembled as she said, "Son, are you sure about this? She is admired, respected. What more could you want a wife?" I could not find the words to explain that admiration means nothing when it is not love, that respect from strangers cannot fill the emptiness of a hollow marriage. How could I tell her that I had lain awake countless nights, listening to the woman beside me dream of another man, that I had endured years of being treated as if I were invisible? To speak it aloud would have sounded pitiful, and I had no desire for pity. So I only smiled faintly and said, "Yes, I'm sure." Friends were harsher. Some laughed at me outright, calling me foolish, telling me I had signed away my happiness with my own hand. "You'll never find another like her," they said. "One day, you'll wake up and realize what you've lost." Their certainty was almost convincing, yet their words did not reach me, because I knew the truth they could never see. What I had lost was not happiness, but the illusion of it. And illusions, once shattered, can never be pieced back together. She, too, played her role well after the divorce. In public, she smiled as though untouched, her beauty brighter than ever, her laughter echoing to the same halls that once suffocated me. People looked at her and saw strength, dignity, even tragedy. To them, she was a wronged heroine, abandoned by the husband who failed to cherish her. And I became the villain of their story, the man too blind to recognize the treasure he held. I did not correct them, let them believe what they wished. The truth was not theirs to carry. It was mine alone. But behind the polished mask, I began to notice cracks. The brightness in her eyes dimmed when she thought no one was looking. Her laughter faltered when she believed herself unobserved. And though she stood surrounded by admirers, I saw a shadow in her gaze, a trace of regret, or perhaps loneliness. For the first time, she seemed to realize that not every man would endure what I had endured. Not every heart would bend without breaking. Yet if regret bloomed in her, she never voiced it. Pride was her armor, and she wore it even as it grew heavy on her shoulders. As for me, I felt a strange kind of peace. Yes, the whispers follow me everywhere. Yes, I was told daily that I would regret the choice I had made. But in the quiet of my own company, I felt lighter than I had in years. There was no more pretending, no more waiting for love that would never come. For the first time, I was free, not from her, but from the chains I had forged myself. They all said I would regret it, but regret is born from losing something precious. And what I had lost was only the illusion of love, a hollow echo of what marriage should be. I did not regret the silence I left behind. I only regretted that it had taken me so long to walk away. The water lies still and wade, the moon's reflection stretching across it like a pout of silver. People look, but the boys are come, carrying a tone of depiction more than excitement, as if Nessie herself were part of the family, an unseen guest of honor. The loch feels alive, not with proof, but with presence, a presence that brings people together in warmth and wonder. Older time, artists painted her, poets described her, and dreamers gave her countless shapes, sometimes sleek and shrin-like, sometimes rounded and kind, sometimes little more than a shadow slipping beneath the waves. Each variant added to the tapestry of the legend, a tapestry that comforted as much as it intrigued. And for those who lived from Scotland, and so, the story of the Loch Ness monster drifts into the present day, not as a question to be solved, but as a melody to be remembered. Nessie remains both a mystery and a comfort, her legend echoing softly across generations like ripples spreading outward on still water. Some continue to search with cameras and sonar, hoping for that one cold glimpse that will finally brood her existence. Others simply smile at the thought of her, content to let the legend live in imagination. Whether hoax or reality, fact or folklore, the monster of Loch Ness has grown into something far larger than any single sighting or photograph. She has become a symbol of wonder, a gentle reminder that the unknown is not always something to fear. Sometimes it is something to cherish. Imagine yourself near the water's edge in the quiet at evening. The air is cool, the sky deepening to twilight, and it does not matter, for the comfort lies in the possibility, in the space between knowing and not knowing, where imagination can rest. In that space, stories are born, stories that carry across centuries, stories that lull the restless mind, stories that invite us to drift toward sleep with hearts a little lighter. The Loch Ness monster, whether real or imagined, has given the world a gift, a reminder that mystery itself is jogging, yet it is enough to wonder, to dream, and to let go. As you close your eyes now, let the loch spread across your thoughts, gas and calm, holding you gently as a legend has held so many before. And in that stillness, let yourself drift deeper and deeper into rest, carried by the sleek history of the monster who is not frightening but timeless, a guardian of dreams, a companion of quiet nights, and a friend who will always linger in the midst of the imagination. And so, while the world still adored her beauty, I saw only the loneliness etched beneath it. While others envied her grace, I heard the silence in her laughter. She had lost a man who once loved her quietly, deeply, without condition, and though she had everything else, admiration, wealth, status, none of it could replace what she had thrown away. In the end, the heroine of the story was not as untouchable as she appeared. Beneath the surface of perfection lay a woman haunted by the choices she had made. And though she would never admit aloud, I knew the truth. The tragedy was no longer mine alone.
Pack Goods Transport Company, Bhakka. Proprietors. Chaudhary Sajjad Ahmad 0300292821 0345684945 Malik Anwar 034486389944 0306864317 एड्रेस MM रोड MM फाइलिंग स्टेशन के साथ 217 अड्डा भक्कर। हमारी खिदमात हर वक्त जैक, माजदा और दीगर लोडिंग गाड़ियां दस्तियाब। जरी अजनास, सब्जियां और फ्रूट की लोडिंग एंड लोडिंग सहूलत, ख़ास तौर पर मौसमी कीनू/माल्टा की महफूज और बरवक्त तरसी। भक्कर से मुख्य बड़े शहरों और मंडियों तक काबिले एतमाद डिलीवरी। सामान की हिफाजत, वक्त की पाबंदी
The silence that once tormented me now became a friend. I filled it with my own thoughts, my own dreams, things I had buried under years of quiet endurance. Slowly, I began to reclaim the pieces of myself I had abandoned. Work became my refuge, but not in the way it once had. Before, I worked to distract myself from loneliness. Now, I worked because I had purpose again. I threw myself into building something of my own, a life not defined by her presence or her absence, but by my choices. And in that pursuit, I found strength I had forgotten I possessed. Projects I had once hesitated to attempt flourished under my determination. Partnerships I had been too timid to chase now fell into place. People began to notice, not the shadow of a husband, not the man behind the heroine, but me. Whispers shifted. The same voices that once mocked me for letting her go now began to murmur in awe. Have you seen what he's accomplished? Perhaps he wasn't such a fool after all. Their tone changed, their judgment softened. But I no longer cared for their approval. I had spent too many years drowning in the opinions of others. Now, the only voice that mattered was my own. It was during this time that I discovered the quiet satisfaction of solitude. I no longer needed to chase validation from a woman who could not love me. I no longer measured my worth by her attention or her indifference. Instead, I measured by the life I was building, by the peace that settled over me each night. It was not an easy journey. There were nights when memories clawed at me, when I wondered perhaps the world had been right, if perhaps I had thrown away something irreplaceable. But every time doubt crept in, I remembered the look in her eyes on the night. I asked if she was happy. That silence, heavier than any answer, reminded me why I had left. With time, I grew into someone I hardly recognized. Stronger, calmer, more certain of my place in the world. I was no longer the man who endured silently. I had learned to speak with my actions, to carve my own path. Opportunities opened, doors I had never dared to approach before. And for the first time, people looked at me without comparing me to her. I was not her husband. I was myself. Ironically, it was in my transformation that I began to notice her decline. The heroine who once glowed brighter than the stars seemed dimmer now. The attention she once basked in no longer satisfied her. Perhaps she saw in me what she had never believed possible, that I could stand tall without her. Perhaps regret gnawed at her, though her pride would never allow her to confess it. She had believed I would always remain in her shadow. She had not expected me to rise from it. And so, while she drifted further into loneliness, I built a new life from the ashes of our broken marriage. Not one defined by revenge, not one built to prove her wrong, but one simply for myself. That, I think, was the greatest transformation of all. I no longer lived for her or for the world's approval. I lived for me, and in that truth, I found a strength she could never take away. In the end, when all the noise had faded and the years stretched between us like an unspoken distance, I looked back not with anger, nor with longing, but with a strange, quiet clarity. People still ask me sometimes if I regretted it, signing those papers, letting her go, walking away for what the world called perfection. My answer was always the same. No, because regret belongs to those who lose something precious, and what I lost was never mine to begin with. She, however, could not escape the weight of what she had chosen. Pride had carried her for so long, but even pride cannot mask the loneliness that grows in the absence of love. There were whispers now, not of her beauty or her brilliance, but of her solitude. Admirers still circled her, eager to claim the heroine the world had adored, but she kept them all at arm's length. Perhaps she was waiting for him, the man whose name she had whispered in her sleep. Perhaps she realized too late that he had never been the savior she believed him to be. Whatever the truth, she stood alone, the echo of her past choices haunting her steps. I, on the other hand, had built something unshakable, not just wealth or status, though those came in time. What I built was peace. I learned to breathe without the weight of silence pressing on my chest. I learned to stand without craving another's validation. I learned that love, if it does not come freely, is not love at all. It is only chains disguised as devotion. And once I broke free of those chains, I could never imagine binding myself again. Sometimes our paths still cross. When our eyes meet across a crowded room, there is a flicker there, Something she tries to hide but cannot. Regret, recognition, perhaps even sorrow. She no longer carries a defiance she once wore like armor. Instead, there is a softness, almost a plea, though unspoken. But I do not approach her. I do not offer the comfort I once longed to give. That part of me is gone, buried with the years we wasted. I wish her no harm, but I also owe her nothing. My silence now is not born of weakness, but of strength. And in that silence, I realize the truth of our story. I have been cast as a tragic male lead, the man destined to suffer, to love without return, to lose a heroine everyone believed was his perfect match. But tragedy is not written by fate. It is written by choices. She chose a love that was never mine to give, and I chose, finally, to let go. If there is tragedy here, it is hers, not mine, for I found freedom in the end, while she remains trapped in the echoes of what might have been. I do not hate her. How could I? She taught me the cost of loving someone who cannot love you back. She taught me the danger of silence, of enduring too long in the hope that things will change. She taught me that sometimes the bravest act is not holding on, but walking away. And though those lessons came with pain, they shaped me into the man I am now. For that, I am grateful. So when people say I will regret it, I only smile. Regret is hers to carry, not mine. She lost a man who loved her quietly, faithfully, without condition. She lost a chance to build a life of trust and tenderness. She lost a story that could have been. And me? I lost only my chains. In the end, I became more than a tragic male lead of a romance gone wrong. I became the author of my own story, one where love will not be begged, where silence will not suffocate, where my worth is not measured by the gaze of another. That is not tragedy. That is freedom, and it is the only ending I will ever accept.